Utah has a chance to land one of the pass rushers in the nation, and an elite four-star running back is considering Utah too. All that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes today. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College. That's all caps, no spaces, Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, head over to Gametime today. My name is GT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Kevin Borba, the head of all Utes Nation, and you does a great job on the site breaking everything down. And Kevin, you were the guy. Your site was the first two that I saw mention what we are going to be diving into here, talking about multiple recruits at the University of Utah is in the running for. So if you guys want more of Kevin's content, make sure you guys head over and check out All Utes Today. They do a great job breaking everything down there. But Kevin, we got to start first with some really quick news that we'll talk about at the very end. We are less than 100 days away from the start of the college football season for when Utah plays. Week 0 is even closer than that, actually. So I know I'm extremely fired up about that. We're going to talk about that even more at the very end. But that's what we do these shows, right? To talk about the games. And especially with your team like Utah, you have high expectations to win a lot of games because that's what Utah's done the past few years. And they're in the midst of trying to land a recruit that could help them win a lot of games. The guy that Utah is in the process of trying to land right now is AJ Epenesa. That's right. If you hear that Epinesa last name, was like, oh, AJ Epenesa from Iowa. Yes, that is actually his brother. And this is a guy who, he is literally the third-ranked pass rusher in the nation, 20th overall prospect in the class of 2025. We'll talk about the visits and other schools that are vying for his talents in a moment, but I can even give a little bit of a more specific breakdown. But Kevin, I think I kind of said all I needed to say when he's the third best pass rusher in the nation, and he's going to be visiting Utah. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about him as a recruit, because I think a lot of especially someone ranked as highly as him, you touched on a little bit. 24/7 has him ranked as the 20th overall recruit, which when things kind of come to fruition, they start dishing out 5 stars. That means he is likely in line to be a 5-star recruit, or at least a borderline 5-star recruit, which is a pretty big deal for Utah because obviously there's not many 5-star recruits heading up to Salt Lake City. But I think it says a lot about him. I think he kind of, and if you look at his top schools, which I don't remember if you mentioned them, so sorry if you did. I'm going to go over them again.
You're good.
Okay, Iowa, Penn State, Miami, Utah, and I think it just kind of tells you he's looking for development. Like all those schools, they're not the flashiest. They're not the sexiest schools. In Missouri was the other one I missed. And they're not like the flashiest, biggest brands, but I think he's trying to go somewhere where he can make an impact. I think clearly he kind of values, I don't want to say a small town vibe, but sort of a small program vibe, minus Miami. Miami's obviously huge, but you know what I mean? Where it's like, I think he's trying to find a location for him where he'll be developed, get to the league, and have a chance to produce. And I think Utah has shown that if you work hard, you play well, you will produce and you will get to the NFL. I look at Jonah Ellis. He popped off this past year, and I think this is kind of like, I think that's the blueprint for Utah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you make a great point on the thing that excites me about Utah having a chance amongst these schools is there isn't Alabama. There's not Georgia on there right now. It is a bunch of schools that are known for a strong culture. Even say what you want about Mario Cristobal, he's trying to get things turned around down in Miami. And I think the other thing, too, is you mentioned being developed. That's obviously a priority for him because let's look at the schools. Once Penn State. Chop Robinson was a second-round pick this year. Yetur Gross-Matos was a high pick for them. Micah Parsons, obviously a little different position, but he was obviously a dominant like linebacker, DN type guy when he was at Penn State. Missouri, they just had a defensive lineman who went just outside of the first-round top 40 pick there. Iowa, we know that they've got Epinesa, his older brother, on top of some other defensive linemen they have there. One of them's on the Packers, whose name's escaping me. Utah, Jonah Ellis, what he just did. Bradley and I, if we're looking for a past one. Miami, you could get a guy like a Jalen Phillips as long as a Gregory Rousseau, like all of these schools that he's looking at, it seems like he's trying to look for, as you perfectly highlighted, which when Utah is looking for a recruit, I feel like the guys they look for are the ones who want to win, play right away, and get their skills developed to the NFL level. That sounds like a simple list, but obviously some guys are looking for the biggest NIL bag and all the things of that nature. And that's not just usually a guy that lines up with what Kyle Whittingham wants in his players. And not only does this guy just what he's looking for in a school seem to line up, his skill set more than lines up. 6'3", 230 pounds. This is a guy who's relentless when it comes to pursuing QBs. Doesn't take long when you turn on the tape to see he can set the edge. He's got exceptional strength, does a great job getting past blockers and standing them up. Quick off the snap, can just go right through a guy. Great technique. Just can win inside or out. I mean, he is one of the most complete players I've seen as a defensive end that Utah's had their name mentioned in a long time. And that's because usually Utah, when you see they are the third best defensive end in the nation, Utah's not usually in that discussion.
Yeah, I think Utah, and there's no shame in this, but Utah goes after Utah style recruits where it's like,
yeah,
this guy is probably a California, Texas, a West Coast native, or sometimes Florida. In the instance of a couple guys, but it's someone who's overlooked by the schools there, where it's like USC and UCLA weren't pushing hard for him in Southern California. Same thing with the Florida guys they got a few years ago, whereas like Florida State, Miami, and the University of Florida kind of overlooked them. And so for them to be in the mix for a guy this big, it's a really big deal. And I also wanted to point out the fact that he has a different type of athleticism, which you're probably like, how does a defense lineman have a different type of athleticism? He plays basketball and he runs track or participates in track and field. So he's obviously someone who has a sort of different athletic build than most defensive linemen or most high school recruits. Because a lot of guys that play football, they focus on one position or one sport in particular, or they excel in like baseball. It's not, you don't really get that football basketball combo as often, I feel like, as you used to. So he's someone that I think if Utah were to get him, I think he probably, once he gets a little bit bigger, could have a role like Jonah Ellis, who I think people forget wasn't always a sack machine. Like he wasn't racking up double-digit sacks every year. So I think if he develops and has an interest in sticking around, that'd be the place for him. Iowa, obviously the brother relationship is there, but does he want to make a name for himself, or does he want to have to sort of live up to the family standard all the time?
Does he want to be on the field 75% of the time because the offense can't do anything? Or would he rather go to a Utah where the offense can do some nice things? And you're absolutely right. I mean, it wasn't long ago at all that Kyle Whittingham was talking about Connor O'Toole is the best pass rusher on this team before the season started. And then, oh, hey, Jonah Ellis is only going to go in the second round because of how stout he is when it comes to getting after quarterbacks. So it was amazing to see what Ellis put together. And Utah might lose a lot after this season, too. You look at guys like Connor O'Toole might decide to depart. I mean, he's been here for a while. Van Fillinger, I'd be shocked if he stays around another year too. And after that, you're looking at the likes of even a Logan Fano. If he were to explode this year, there's a chance he could leave because this will be 3 years for him. Injury concerns would be interested to see where the draft range is for him, but he's a guy capable of getting 8+ sacks in my opinion. So there's a room for Epinesa to come in and play right away at a school like Utah, which has got to be alluring to him. Utah will get their visit with Epinesa on June 15th. They'll have one of the last few opportunities to make an impression on him. They're actually sandwiched between Iowa, third to last, and Miami, the very last, June 22nd. And then June 8th for the Iowa one. So going to be fun to follow along with this recruiting because, defense can still win championships, but it's also nice to have a pretty strong offense, Kevin. And Utah is hoping they can land a strong offensive running back when they're looking at a guy in Michael Turner, who is an elite running back prospect who has named Utah to one of his top schools. We're going to be talking about what it means and the chances that Utah can get a guy like Turner in one moment. But first, want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on the spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. Capital L and O for locked on to make, and one word too, to make every playoff shot count. And the playoffs have been incredible this year. I mean, who had the Pacers reaching this point of the NBA season? So are the Pacers going to be able to somehow topple Boston? Are the Celtics going to get back to the finals and try to make amends from what the Warriors did for them a few years ago? How about across the way? I'm a huge Minnesota fan. I can't believe my Wolves are finally here after 20 years of futility, but here they are. Got to take on Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving. It's going to be a fun series. You can bet on player props, over-unders, so many great things at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Kevin, let's talk about our next high-level recruit. And that's what's really exciting about this one is these are high-level recruits too. And like we mentioned, the fact that Utah is in the conversation for these guys is really exciting because these are the type of players that Utah hasn't always been able to land. But when you pair a guy with this high of a ceiling with Utah's system and development, the potential really excites me. And that's what I love about a guy like Michael Turner. He's the 9th ranked running back in the class of 2025 and is the 125th player overall in the nation. And this is a guy who, when you're looking at some of his top schools, Utah is right in the list of them as well. And why would Utah not be? This is a program that no matter how good they throw the ball, this is still going to be ground and pound Utah. That's what they're going to be. We know the offensive lineman they're going to bring in. Kyle Whittingham, being the defensive-minded head coach he is going to want to run and take care of the football. And Turner has some incredible traits that we can break down a little bit more in a second, but I think his fit in this Utah offense in 2025, there's a lot of really good running backs from the 23 class that didn't get a run yet, so maybe he would have to sit a year by the time he got to 25, but who knows? Maybe he breaks through right away. Maybe even in 26, especially. Like, this is a guy who I think has a chance to be a real difference maker if Utah can land him.
Yeah, I think Utah's in a weird position with running backs. I feel like since Zach Moss's departure, they haven't had like someone. Like, I'm not gonna say they haven't good running backs, but they haven't had someone stick like Zach Moss did.
Oh yeah, I mean Tavion Thomas, kind of a 1-year wonder, right?
Yeah, so it's like who's gonna be that next guy? Who's gonna whether it's gonna be Glover, Bernard, who's it gonna be? And so they obviously lost Jaquindon Jackson this offseason. So Michael Turner kind of stands out as someone who he played on varsity as a freshman. He runs track super fast, which track in Texas, because he's from somewhere in Texas. Track in Texas is very different than in most states. Those guys in high school are like running some really quick times, and so he exploded this past season. And to read off his stat line a little bit, had 1,600 yards rushing, 7.7 yards per carry, 22 touchdowns. So adding him to the mix, I feel like sort of adds another dynamic to the offense. You get that speed, you get that youth, and he's also a really good receiver as well. So I think that kind of complements the Utah offense in a major way because they want the ball in their playmakers' hands. And so getting the ball in his hands would be very easy if he could do a little bit of everything.
As a former Texas high school track player myself, Kevin, I got to say I love the love that you're giving to Texas high school. I was a little more of a thrower. I was too cool to run. Sprints weren't my thing. But I can attest to, like you said, the track scene out in Texas, there are some monsters out there, guys that can get after it, especially like for what I did, the shot in the disc. I mean, my gosh, you're talking about a bunch of Division I offensive linemen all up and down the field. So anytime I see a thrower or a sprinter on there, that gets me exciting from a recruiting standpoint. And continue to talk about Turner, got to watch some of his tape. Great vision, does a really good job finding the cutback lanes. He's shifty. I mean, he can make jump cuts, just really good cuts in general, does a good job making guys miss. He can drag defenders with him too, does a good job trusting his blockers, and he's not looking to just bounce everything to the outside. He's like, okay, do I need to bounce to the outside, or is the best opportunity to gain yards up the middle of the field? And he's not someone who shies away from contact. So I think Turner is someone that would be a really nice piece for Utah, and I love the point that you brought up about the next Utah running back. Jaquindon Jackson, right? It's been a weird thing. Tavion Thomas emerged. We didn't think he was even going to be the guy, and then Tavion Thomas emerged. And then next year, we all thought Tavion was going to have a great year. And injuries and other things happen. Doesn't really go his way. Jaquindon emerges at the end of the season. And then next year, Jaquindon kind of battles injuries all throughout the season. So he's in one game, he's out. He's never quite able to be that guy. So you're still waiting to see. Even Jalen Glover, right? There was a lot of hope about him coming in. Maybe even some people said he might be the next Zach Moss. And it's been tough because of how many good running backs are in front of him. And now he's going to be going into year 3. So we'll see what he can do in year 3 with this Utah program, including a lot of other really good running back recruits still playing alongside of him. But we're still waiting on Utah to try and get the bell cow in general. But that's what's awesome about landing a guy like Turner on top of the other players you have in the room, Kevin, is you want to have as many guys as talented as possible, because when the Jaquindon Jacksons and the Tavion Thomases of the world battle injuries, got to be that next man up mentality.
Yeah, now Utah, the injury thing is like weird. Like injuries is like a part of Utah right now. I don't know like if it's just like freak luck or maybe they need to change up their workout routine. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but yeah, you touched on it a lot. They need depth, they need talent, and they brought in Anthony Woods from the portal from Idaho, but they just need a lot more stability. I think every team wants to have 3 running backs where it's like, if we had to turn to you, like you'd be fine. But I also think every team deep down is like, okay, we want this guy and then guys that will complement him. And last year, Sione Vaki, I think, was the best running back all around in the sense of like you could use them in the pass game, you could use them in the run game, and they kind of figured that out by like midway through the season because obviously he wasn't expected to play running back. So it's like who is going to just show that sense of consistency from the jump? And maybe it could be him if Utah were to land him. They got some heavy hitters they're competing with for him.
Indeed, they do. His top 12 includes Washington, Michigan State, TCU, Oregon, SMU, Florida, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Baylor, our good old Utah Utes, Pitt, and Arizona. Some of those, like I hear, like, and I'm like, Arizona, I'm like, okay, I think Utah's a better running back destination there. But Oklahoma State, I can't compete with what Ollie Gordon's doing there right now. If they promise him being the bell cow like that, that'll be a tough one. Oregon's had a ton of success with running backs recently, too. Yeah. Washington, Michigan State, both ones that have done some nice things in the backfield, too. So, going to be interesting to see where Turner ends up. And one interesting thing about the theme of this show, though, is we've talked about 2 4-stars in the class of 2025. Utah only brought in 2 4-stars in the class of 2024. I talked about it on my show this week. Is that a sign for concern? I don't think so because they focus so much on the transfer portal and bring in win now guys. But look, this is a Utah team that Cam Rising, Karene Reed, Brant Keithy, Money Parks, like there are a lot of holdovers from the first Pac-12 championship team, let alone even the second one. So I think after this year, especially once Cam departs, which is why these guys' belief in Cam is why they came back, I feel like we could see a lot of turnover. And I think not only will Utah continue to bring in those transfers, but I expect to see more 4-stars enter the foray of this program next fall, Kevin, when in 2 falls, when the 2025 class arrives.
Yeah, I think this is I'm not trying to create speculation by any means. This is just my opinion, like my sort of putting things together. I think the 2024 class, that is like all in win now. They bring in how many transfers? They're at 12 transfers right now, 34th class in the country in terms of the portal. And then you look at their high school class, they brought in 15 guys. So that screams win now. So it's like, are they all in on making the playoff this year, or are they all in for another reason? And then like the wheels start turning, and it's like Kyle Whittingham said he only wants to coach till he's 65.
I was waiting for you there.
In November, and I'm like, okay, is this like a all in for one? Like, is this a last dance type of vibe? So I'm interested to see how their success with these 4-stars continues, because it's one thing to be in the mix for them, but if they land a few of them, that shows to me that there's some buy-in from Kyle Whittingham. If they kind of fizzle out and it's like, okay, they're not really putting together a class, then I'd be a little interested to see what the coach's plans are.
I agree. And that's something I got to do an episode on here in the near future. But man, in an era where like nothing is certain, there's just a lot of signs that make sense of this being Kyle Whittingham's last year, potentially. When you look at the facts of like, hey, I'm getting up here, but I don't want to leave you guys in the first year of the Big 12 entering, the new coach. Plus, we got a pretty dang good team. Right. We know how good he feels about Cam Rising. So if this were Coach Witt's last year, and I know the recruits say like, oh, I'm coming up for Coach Whittingham and everything, but it's just going to be something very interesting to see. And we'll definitely dive into it on a future episode of Locked On Utes too. But we have Kyle Whittingham for this season for sure. And this coming season is less than 100 days away, which is just fantastic. We got to talk about the excitement and momentum is building to Utah finally being back on the field in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our great friends at Gametime. Gametime is the ticketing app for you because they're an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app, they actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in-price views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime really takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can pick out specific matchups you want to attend, and there's all kinds of deals, whether it's the flash deals where you save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. How about zone deals, where you save even more when you choose a selection and let Gametime choose the seats. There's also that seat view where you get a panoramic view from your seat in an app before you buy, and the low price guarantee. I mean, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Are you kidding me? That's without even mentioning the ticket coverage, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So you can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE with a capital L for locked, O for on, and college is all caps, all of that one word too, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Kevin, you and I cover college football teams, and that is the main thing we do. And we talk about the upcoming season. And when the season ends back in the 23-1 did. Oh man, did it feel like it was a long time off. And then I got the notification recently that we are less than 100 days away from college football being back. And I know, especially from a Utah perspective, I'm so fired up for this season. There's a chance that Utah can make history. To me, they are the favorites in the Big 12. To me, their schedule lines up for them to be really good. Their roster lines up for them to be really good. I think this is a chance to have a season to be remembered for Utah, and I can't wait to kick off all these new Big 12 rivalries in a year with an expanded playoff format that I think should include Utah if everything goes their way.
Yeah, I think it's exciting because football goes through like this weird cycle where it's like everyone's pumped for the season goes by and it's like, okay, what just happened? The season's gone. Then there's like recruiting signing day, the transfer portal, and then it's just silence. Then we get the spring game and it's like, okay, football's back. And then it's silence again. And it's a very long silence. So for Utah football to be here and college football in general be here in less than 100 days, that's exciting for us because we're getting to the dog days of summer, if you will, where it's like, I'm thinking about week 5 matchups just randomly. I'm like, that one might be interesting, but I don't know. It's too early to talk about it. But yeah, Utah has a chance to make history. I think, like you mentioned, the Big 12, which I want to put this out there, it is really good. The Big 12, I don't think it's as elite as the Pac-12 was last year, but I do think, and I don't know if this is mathematically possible, but it wouldn't shock me if like almost every team in the Big 12 makes a bowl game. Like I don't know if that's possible, but I do think it could happen. That's
I think there's a great chance there's a lot of the middle of the pack ones in particular really beat up on each other. And especially like you said, 16 making it'll be tough, but man, you're telling me 13, 14 did somehow. I think there's a chance in a couple, because there's a lot of teams you look at and you're like, well, they got this quality aspect and they could do this and this nice thing like that. So that's where this is going to be a really exciting season for Utah to enter the Big 12, see if they can make history with the new playoff format, and less than 100 days from it happening. So I can't wait. And, Kevin, you mentioned it. There's a little less going on right now, but there's still a lot of recruiting to track. There's lists that are coming out. Baseball teams gearing up for a Pac-12 run, hopefully after falling a little bit late in the season. But there's a lot to try and keep straight. Where should everyone head over to do it if they want to keep it?
Yeah, you could go check us out on Twitter. We're at Inside the Utah Utes. We're talking about all things Utah football. Got a great team of writers with me. We're just at all Utes, on Twitter. Had to change the Twitter profile recently, but we are covering all things Utah. Like JT said earlier in the show, we are trying to stay on top of everything. So everything, whether it's recruiting, baseball, softball, we got you covered. We got you the day it happens. We even got a really cool article coming out about which Utes we think will have the highest rating on EA Sports College Football 25. So that will be really fun. I think it's going to be a really cool sort of off season of coverage. And then once the video game is here, we will do some coverage on that as well. So you guys won't want to miss it. Come check us out.
I'm going to go Brant Keithy off the top of my head, by the way, highest rated Ute. I'm curious to see where you guys land. If you guys want to find out, go over and check out the list. This is Friday, so this is our last episode of the weekend. So make sure you guys head over and check out everything Kevin's got on going over there. Also give him a follow at Kevin_Borba on X. Kevin, always great having you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and we'll be back at you with more Utah coverage next week.